Thompson up and down.
In today's NBA, where versatility gets hyped up, a lot of guys have still managed to carve out long, successful careers by being amazing at just one thing. People often call them one-trick ponies. Let's be real though, that phrase feels lazy, like it means they're bad overall. The truth is, these players squeezed every ounce of value from their one elite skill. In this breakdown, we'll check out 6 NBA players who really only did one thing well, and maybe that's all they ever needed. Oh, slick little move there. Kinda looking like a point guard for a second. Andre Drummond. Drummond came into the league in 2012 at just 19 years old. Honestly, you could argue he never added anything new to his game. He entered as a monster rebounder and stayed that way. He led the league in rebounds 4 different seasons, and offensive boards 7 times. That's proof of his insane knack for always being in the right spot, like the ball was drawn to him. Of course, a lot of those boards came from him missing at the rim and just padding his stats, grabbing rebound after rebound after rebound. Watch him snag 3 in a row before finally scoring. Still, you can't deny the impact. Drummond's dominance on the boards makes people assume he should also be a great defender, a strong pick-and-roll finisher, or maybe even a solid post scorer. I mean, he's a legit 7-footer, 280 pounds, with a freakish 7 feet 6 inches wingspan. The guy's massive, and just his frame alone should overwhelm most centers. But here's the reality. Outside of rebounding, he plays way smaller than his body suggests. For instance, he never even averaged 2 blocks a game, and his defensive awareness is flat out poor. He's slow, unfocused, and often out of position. At the rim, he only converts 64% of his shots, which is terrible when you compare him to other lob-catching bigs like Rudy Gobert or DeAndre Jordan. Drummond's efficiency is embarrassing for a center with no jumper. If you've never actually watched him and just scanned the box scores, you'd probably buy into the lie that he's a decent offensive player. People see the points and field goal percentage and assume, oh, this guy can score. But no, he really can't. In fact, his true shooting percentage stayed below average most of his career, and way below average compared to other centers. Most of Drummond's offensive game is just catching dump-off passes near the rim, and even then, he fumbles those. To make things worse, his Pistons teams were often poorly built around him. Add in the fact that he never had a jumper and his free throw shooting has always been laughably bad. Out of all qualified players in NBA history, Drummond's career 48.6% from the line is the 3rd worst ever, only above Ben Wallace and DeAndre Jordan. Saying he's only good at rebounding almost feels too generous. Outside of that, he's basically unplayable, straight up awful in nearly every other area. That's why, despite piling up rebounds like crazy, Drummond rarely made any real positive impact on his teams. Now let's move on to Kyle Korver. To be fair, you could plug in any 3-point specialist here, guys like JJ Redick, Klay Thompson, or even Steve Novak. But the reason I picked Korver is simple. Not only was everything else in his game below average, but he actually made an all-star team purely because of his 3-point shot. Sure, the Hawks won 60 games that year, so everyone hyped them up, but let's be honest, everyone jumped on the Hawks bandwagon that season, but Korver making the all-star team was ridiculous, and it just proves how deadly his shot really was. He led the league in 3-point percentage 4 times, and his peak came in Utah when he set the all-time single-season record at 53.6%. That's insane shooting. But let's be real. The rest of his game was ugly. Unlike JJ Redick, who was an absolute machine running off screens, or Klay Thompson, who paired elite defense with his shooting, Korver brought none of that. He was just a spot-up guy, mostly catching and shooting because back then NBA offenses didn't demand constant motion. As for putting the ball on the floor, playmaking, attacking the rim, or passing, forget it. That stuff didn't exist in his arsenal. The crazy part is he still managed to carve out a career that spanned over 1,200 games on nothing but shooting threes. But if Korver entered today's league, I doubt he'd last as long. In the modern NBA, you can't survive as a one-trick shooter. You've got to defend, switch, and do more or else teams will pick you apart. Korver is the perfect case of being in the right era at the right time. The 3-point revolution was just getting started back then, which made Korver's shooting even more valuable. Being ahead of the curve gave his teams a legit edge. But now let's move on. Tony Allen. The idea of a defensive specialist has changed a lot in today's NBA. Just like shooters, defenders now have to offer more than one skill. But when Allen, better known as the Grindfather, was in his prime, defense alone kept him on the floor. He made 6 all-defensive teams with the Grizzlies and was the backbone of their top 10 defense for years. He was flat out annoying to play against. "It's up to Tony Allen to shut down the water," the announcers would say as he smothered guys and ripped the ball away. When superstars were asked who gave them the most problems, Kobe, LeBron, and even Kevin Durant all said Tony Allen was the toughest defender they'd ever faced. At just 6 feet 4 inches and 210 pounds, he was undersized for a shooting guard, but he made up for it with his stocky frame, crazy quick hands, and non-stop pressure. He suffocated opponents before they could even make a move. Sadly, though, that was pretty much the full extent of his game. That was the limit of Allen's game. The Memphis Grizzlies made the playoffs 7 straight years from 2011 to 2017, with Allen playing a role every season. But the team's biggest flaw was always their offense. They lacked creators, which made their attack predictable and boring. While the rest of the league was embracing pace and space basketball with multiple playmakers, Memphis looked like a fossil. And sure, that wasn't only Tony Allen's fault, but his complete lack of offense didn't help. Defense can only take you so far. As a shooting guard, he averaged just 1 assist per game across his career, which is laughable. And there's no way he'd get away with that in today's NBA. What they desperately needed was another perimeter threat, another player who could actually create, and Allen never gave them that. Still, he managed to last 14 seasons by maxing out one skill. That's respectable in its own way. For about 5 or 6 years, he was arguably the best perimeter defender alive, and that defense alone kept him around. Next up, Kenneth Faried. If you opened an NBA encyclopedia and flipped to the section on hustle and energy, his picture would be sitting right there. If there was ever a picture next to the word hustle in the basketball dictionary, it would be Kenneth Faried. Now, I'm not saying he had the most energy of any player ever. Plenty of guys made careers off effort. But Faried is the clearest example of someone who only stayed on the floor because his energy powered his whole game. Sure, you could say he was a solid rebounder, but he wasn't great at positioning or boxing out. He grabbed boards by simply outworking people. Truth is, every part of his game was weak, but his hustle covered it up. That's why by 29 he was already out of the league. Once the drive and hunger faded, he had nothing else to lean on. His entire career was built on energy. Catching lobs, rolling to the rim, chasing rebounds, and even on defense where his effort made him look better than he really was. But once the motor slowed down, the truth showed. On top of that, being a 6 feet 8 inches power forward/center was already a tough sell in the NBA. And in today's game, it's even tougher. It's even tougher when you've got no offensive bag. But Faried managed to carve out a role in Denver because he showed up at the perfect time. The Nuggets were rebuilding, testing out young talent, and playing at a breakneck pace. Top 5 in the league in pace for 4 straight years. Faried thrived in that environment because all he had to do was sprint the floor and his energy would guarantee some kind of impact. It also helped that the rest of the roster was young and willing to run with him. But the moment Denver shifted styles and Nikola Jokic started running the offense, Faried became useless. In a slower half-court setting where defenses actually pay attention, he had nothing to offer. With limited skills and even more limited physical tools, his impact vanished overnight. Now let's move to Jason Williams. Honestly, it took me a while to decide if he should be on this list. Despite his flaws, his playstyle was unforgettable, built entirely around his insane passing. They called him White Chocolate for a reason, his flash, creativity, and the way he looked like he was improvising everything on the court. At his peak, very few players in history could entertain a crowd like Jason Williams. But outside of passing, his game fell flat. He was a terrible jump shooter, with multiple seasons launching over 6 threes a night while hitting under 30%. That's near the top in attempts but near the bottom in accuracy. His first 3 years in Sacramento turned him into a human highlight reel and one of the league's most popular players. The problem? His actual production never matched the hype. Williams was reckless, often out of control, ignoring coaches and making wild decisions. One season he averaged nearly 4 turnovers a game despite handing out 7 assists. On top of that, he picked up fines and suspensions for his behavior. Sacramento eventually traded him for Mike Bibby, and suddenly the Kings reached another level. Bibby wasn't flashy, but he was reliable and gave them the steady point guard play they'd been missing. As for Williams, passing always remained the single elite part of his game. Over the years he made small improvements, but the truth is his highlights outshined his real impact. Even though Jason Williams slowly improved, adding a three-point shot, calming down his chaotic style, and even winning a championship as Miami's starting point guard, his career faded fast. The issue was that, no matter what he added, his reputation never changed. Coaches never trusted him, and every mistake meant a quick hook. His minutes dropped until he eventually retired. Now let's talk about Roy Hibbert. Remember the term verticality? Hibbert basically put that word on the NBA map. It means if a defender jumps straight up to contest a shot, it's legal defense, even if there's body contact. Hibbert mastered it. At 7 feet 2 inches with perfect timing, he squeezed every ounce of value out of that rule and became one of the best rim protectors of his era. In 2013 and 2014, he anchored Indiana's defense to the #1 spot in the league, shutting down even elite offenses. For a while, he was the wall no one could break through. But then the playoffs came around, and the weaknesses in his game started to show. George Hill feeds Hibbert inside, blocked by Kyle Korver, definitely not known as a shot blocker, was proof that once Hibbert had to leave the paint, he was exposed. Outside of verticality, Hibbert really didn't bring much. He was average at best in everything else, and defending away from the rim was a nightmare for him. Small ball lineups like the Heat and Hawks shredded him by spacing the floor with shooters. And for a 7 feet 2 inches, 270-pound center, his rebounding was shockingly weak. In the 2014 playoff series against Atlanta, Hibbert grabbed fewer than 5 boards in 5 of the 7 games, including the infamous 0-rebound game and back-to-back scoreless outings. On offense, he wasn't much better. His efficiency was awful for a big man, with multiple seasons shooting only 44 to 45% from the field despite most attempts coming right at the rim. I still remember Shaq clowning him on national TV, saying Hibbert should be putting up 28 and 15, but let's be real, that was never happening. Over time, his success in Indiana started to look like a fluke. It was the perfect setup for him. The whole defense was designed to funnel players into the paint so Hibbert could just stand tall and contest. Indiana's defensive scheme made Hibbert's verticality look like a superpower. But once he left the Pacers, everything fell apart. He couldn't adapt, and when his one trick stopped working, he became useless. At a time when the center position was evolving with skilled bigs on the rise, Hibbert stayed stuck in the Stone Age. Unlike Brook Lopez, who reinvented himself with a three-point shot, Hibbert never put in the work to evolve. Within just 2 seasons of leaving Indiana, he was completely out of the league. And that wraps up 6 NBA players who found success by excelling at only one thing. For them, that one skill was enough to give them long, impactful careers where, in their own ways, they helped every team they joined. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who else do you think had a lasting NBA career just by being elite at a single skill? Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.